Hello, it's Daz. Each week, new things happen. For instance, there's a new pope, and he's American. Pope Leo, or Robert Francis Prevost. And it's interesting to see this because a lot of people thought there would never be an American pope because America has been pretty Protestant. But despite that, there is now an American pope, and I don't think that's a mistake with everything that's happening with America and its struggle to maintain world domination. Something else that happened this week, on a personal note, I went and saw the movie Sinners, and I have to say that there was a lot of hidden meaning in it. A lot of people are focusing more on the historical context of it, taking place in the Deep South, predominantly black cast, living in Jim Crow South, living in sharecropping conditions, which pretty much was like an extension of slavery, where they were freed, but they still pretty much worked on the land because they were so poor. And it opens with, and this is spoilers if you haven't seen it and you plan to see it, the pastor giving a sermon, and his son comes in and he has the guitar, and his dad is trying to get him to put it down because he sees that kind of music, blues music, as the devil's music. And a lot of people have said that he's an inspiration of Robert Johnson, and a lot of people believe Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil or made a deal with Papa Legba, who is within Hoodoo tradition. And I don't know a lot about Hoodoo. One thing about this movie is it was definitely introductory for some people who didn't know a lot about it, because one of the main characters, she practiced Hoodoo, and Hoodoo apparently uses a lot of, it's like a blend of West African religions and witchcraft, but blended with Christianity. So like the Book of Psalms is used for spells, for instance, or like anointing oil has a different meaning, and so forth. And I do feel like films like this in general, a lot of horror films and films that deal with the occult, are meant to pique curiosity about the occult and get people into it. There was definitely messages about like the fact that Michael B. Jordan's characters that he played twins, identical twins that wore a red and blue cap. That seemed kind of like a hidden message with the red and blue when we think of politics. But also, twins often are seen as something special in the occult with different energy, and then their names are practically the same name, Elijah and Elias, because Elias is the Greek name of it. And then there were vampires, which vampires have always been used to represent a myriad of things, both literally and figuratively. I've done videos on vampires. There's sanguine vampires, such as what we think of, and the vampires in this movie that drink blood. There's energy vampires that drain your energy, and then there is pranic vampires, or tantric vampires, I should say, which take your sexual energy. Vampires emerge, a lot of the legends, people think of them coming out of Eastern Europe and the Caucasus Mountains, but also I would say they come a lot of times out of not just Transylvania, but when we look at the Book of Enoch and we look at the Watchers and what their offspring did, drinking blood, that's probably the origin of the sanguine blood drinking vampires. But there's definitely a lot of energy vampire people. These vampires pretty much were the villains of the movie. The main vampire was a Remick, and they made him Irish, which was not a mistake, because he later said that Christianity was forced on his people, which is history, where whenever a lot of the English colonized and forced Christianity, more Protestantism and everything, like the US has a tumultuous history between Protestants and Catholics, as well as other groups. I don't think it's a mistake with everything that we're seeing, all of this. My theory is, with the new pope and everything going on with him being American, and then Trump joking about wanting to be the next pope and even making himself an AI generated image, that we will see more of a union of the mainstream Christian evangelical church with the mainstream Catholic church. I know too often at odds on certain matters, but I think that this will bring unity in the American church between the two. The same way I think that films like this kind of get some people, because a lot of people are talking about Christianity and how it's not really what people think it is, and a lot of it was pagan, And that is true that a lot, like our modern calendar and our modern holidays, a lot of that was changed by the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic Church. And to convert people who were pagan, they did Christianize a lot of pagan religions, but that doesn't take away from the literal celebrations, for instance, of Jesus' resurrection, even though they did try to combine it with the celebration of Ishtar. And a lot of pagan practices have a lot of uncomfortable things to them. But those things are definitely true in that sense. I do see that there is a drive to pique people's curiosity in either witchcraft or other things, or even merge the Protestant and Christians together, which doesn't seem harmful at first. We know that in the last days there's a grand deception coming, and I definitely see that. The other thing that's been happening that I talked about a little bit last week, we touched on, was the ports, and they are showing now on the mainstream media the empty ships and how this is going to impact our supply chain. And then, of course, more and more mass layoffs, because everything has a chain reaction or a domino effect. If you have not enough people working the ports, then you don't need enough truck drivers, and Trump did make that English test mandatory, so that's going to cut out a lot of foreign or non-English speaking truck drivers, as well as even if there's an English test, I wonder if there's people that speak English as their first language, but they're not great with grammar. And then between Texas, I believe it's Austin and Dallas, they have self-driving trucks, so we're seeing the beginning of the automation of jobs happening here. And I don't think it's a mistake. I think that the tech giants, they aligned themselves for a long time with the liberal agenda because they needed funding, but now that that's basically gone rogue and they lost a lot of their credibility, they saw themselves aligning with Trump because they knew they'd get the money, the billions of dollars to continue to push AI, because one of the big wars the U.S. is in, besides trade and then talks of a physical war with China or the East, is even a information and technological war or competition. And right now there's a lot of competition from the East with AI, and so the West is trying to keep up with that as well, and the US is really trying to outdo them with technology. So I do think we're seeing the beginning of automation of jobs, starting with our blue-collar work and our service workers, and we're seeing it now with truck drivers. And I remember a lot of people saying, like, you can't replace my job, but most jobs honestly can be automated. Some think that because of this, we'll have what they call a universal income, kind of like we had the stimulus checks. I just don't trust the government like the one we have. It doesn't really matter who's in power to really give that, or if they do, that means that everything else is going to shoot up extremely high. Let's say everybody got $1,000 check in the mail every 2 weeks or even every month on top of your expected job, then there would be no reason to bring down prices on housing, cars, or anything. I also said this in other videos before, and I know a lot of people are fans of us having better public transportation. I definitely think public transportation is important. The way that the car prices are surging, and I know like here in Kansas City, there's a lot of work being done to modernize the city. Like they're building a few parks, which I think is great, and theme parks and everything, and they're talking about really redoing things and bettering public transportation. I do feel like that's also a ploy by bettering public transportation to have people own cars less. The same way I feel like there's been a conspiracy to take away home ownership, because now we have more people renting homes that were meant to be sold and bought for a mortgage and then paid off to live in, which the property tax has always made it tricky, because even if you own your home and you pay it off, you still have to pay the property taxes. But instead of home ownership, now we have more people renting homes, because I hear so many millennials and Gen Z say they're never going to be home owners. But I also hear people saying they're never going to be able to own a brand new car, or some people aren't going to be able to be car owners with the way things are going. It's all setting the stage, in my opinion. And again, I know every time I say anything, people are like, you don't know the future. And I'm not predicting the future. I'm just giving my opinion on everything I'm seeing and what's being forecasted here. I believe that we're already living in the quote-unquote New World Order, and it's being set up, and we're already in the stages and phases of it. And I think COVID definitely kind of helped bring that in. And I think all of these awakenings and epiphanies people are having spiritually, whether from God, which is holy fire, or from as they talked about in the Old Testament and in the Torah, strange fire, which to me is just anything alternative to that, because the end is about fire. Just like in Noah's time, as compared to, it was water that flooded the world and reset it. It's fire this time that purges everything. So we're in a time of holy fire and strange fire, and you're going to definitely see more surprising things. And I believe we're going to see more supernatural things, but we're also just going to see things that, I remember like the news to me today, and the way I say regular people or normal or normies are talking. They talk like the way people made fun of truthers or conspiracy theorists for end of the world, doomsday preppers talk. Like now that's our cycle pretty much. It's not really that exaggerated. Things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And it is predicted in the seals. Like I saw some TikToks of people talking about the shortages, and this lady was quoting the book of Revelation. She was quoting the seals and about the 4 horsemen and about famine and all of that. And yes, that is very much what we're seeing take place. It's unfolding before our eyes, and it's something that I feel like it's more reason to really get closer to God, have that relationship and pray, because as much as we can do our best to prepare, there's just certain things we can't prepare for. And really the only way we can prepare is spiritually, even though I'm not saying if you have the means to have a bunker and a pantry and all that, but there's a lot that's going to continue to unfold, as I said in my last video about the mirror of 2025 and 2020. And they're saying that it'll probably be even worse with the supply chain, which is crazy to think about. Time will tell. The new Pope, definitely, him being from Chicago, him being American, he spent time in Peru as well. And he spent a lot of time in Rome as well. That's not a mistake, because as I said before, a lot of our battle between modern Babylon and the beast has to do with our conflict of the East and West struggle for domination. And this is America's last stand. And I believe everything that happens from now on is really just setting us up for whatever the end is truly going to look like. But we're already in the beginning of it. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are on it. What do you think about the new Pope? Have you found any interesting information out about Pope Leo? And also, what are your thoughts on the movie Sinners, if you saw it, or any other movies like it, or you feel like are pushing certain ideas? What do you think about the fact that hoodoo is becoming more popular, I'd say more in the Black community, but that's kind of pushing people out of the church and into ideas of witchcraft, or even other pagan ideals in other communities, or even the idea that we may see emerging again in the U.S. of more of a coalition between Catholics and Protestants, of mixing the holy with the profane, because that's really what's happening with a lot of this. Let me know your thoughts on it, or anything else you want to discuss, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, a wonderful weekend. Take care. God bless. Until next time.